Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. So, taking a look at the latest GOES 16 true color visible satellite imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com. There will be a link in the description below this video. And as we can see, the satellite imagery over the Atlantic basin, what we will take note of first is how much Saharan dust is moving off of Africa. We talked about how this is leading to a lot of suppression of thunderstorms. This is what we call the unfavorable phase, the suppressive convective phase right now over much of the Caribbean and much over the western main development region. And we can even see here before the sun sets here, if we go back, we can see the leading edge of this Saharan dust plume, or what we call in meteorological sense a Saharan outbreak, or a SAL outbreak, in other words. And that still seems to be today when we look at all this dust coming off of Africa. And this is warm, dry, dusty Saharan air overlaying the warm, moist boundary layer off the Atlantic, which would otherwise allow a lot of convection. So in this case, this is a temperature inversion slash dew point inversion. And we have also nimbostratus clouds, an indication that we also have some very stable air even at the surface. But while there is a lot of dust coming off of Africa, there are signs that the pattern is going to change in a hurry by late July into early August. But while there is a lot of dust coming off of Africa, allowing the Atlantic to remain quiet, there are signs that there will be big changes down the road by late July into early August, with a huge reduction in Saharan dust outbreaks and a lot more moisture and tropical wave activity developing over Africa and even off of Africa itself. So in the meantime, we could celebrate how quiet the Atlantic basin is right now, because we all know this is going to change in a very quick hurry. It's like a flip of a light switch. Once we go into August, I think we're going to have a lot of activity to be concerned about, and I don't really say this very often. You all need to be afraid of this hurricane season. So for right now, looking pretty quiet in the Atlantic over the next 7 days, which is good. And also in the Eastern Pacific, only 2 areas to watch, but these only have a 20 to 30% chance of tropical development. And because of how stable the air mass is, we get northerly flow coming out of the north this way. And we even have enhanced trade winds blowing some drier air off of some of the landmass here. I really don't think these systems will develop at all, and for the time being, the Eastern Pacific is holding very quiet, unusually, ironically, and has only happened one time in the last 100 years where the Eastern Pacific was this quiet. So with that being said, here's a look at the latest sea surface temperatures over the Gulf of Mexico. These are not your anomalies. These are actual sea surface temperatures right now, roughly delayed by about a day, but it gives a pretty good perspective of how warm the Gulf of Mexico is here. And just because you see green colors on this map does not illustrate that, oh, water temperatures are not that warm at all. We have to understand the legend has been upgraded a little bit because of how warm the waters are off the coast of Louisiana, which we'll talk about here in a second. But also take note here, virtually the entire Gulf of Mexico, other than just a little few islands here off the Yucatan Peninsula, likely churned up by Tropical Storm Beryl a week ago, water temperatures there are even around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So virtually the entire Gulf now is technically deemed favorable with sea surface temperatures to support tropical storms or hurricanes, possibly violent hurricanes perhaps, once those water temperatures get very warm into the northern Gulf of Mexico. But our water temperatures here are in the mid 80s, perhaps, across most of the northern Gulf, and even in the Bay of Youth, the island of Youth here, water temperatures 31 Celsius. But take a look at this. And if you guys want to say I'm fear-mongering, hyping things up, you need to be afraid of this. 32 Celsius waters off the coast of Louisiana. I mean, that's 91 degrees Fahrenheit. That is alarming. That is very unusual for mid-July. I mean, keep in mind, folks, 2 more months. We have 2 more months. before these water temperatures reach their warmest. Actually, more like early September when they reach their warmest in the Gulf of Mexico, because the shelf waters start to cool off a little sooner before the rest of the Atlantic. But my point here is being water temperatures here, 31 Celsius. You need to be afraid of this, because if we get a tropical storm that moves over here and then moves up and kind of glides across the Gulf very slowly, takes 2 or 3 days to get to, say, Louisiana or Texas, these storms could explode extremely quickly. Something that we saw with Otis, something that we saw with Lee last year. Remember how quick Lee exploded with those sea surface temperatures of about 29, 30 Celsius? We could see something like that this year in the Gulf of Mexico if the background state gets very favorable and very conducive. Now, when we take a look at the Atlantic sea surface temperatures as a whole here, looking at the main development region, looking at the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Atlantic combined, water temperatures are formidably warm for this time of the year. It may not look like that, maybe even looks like that on this map. Wait until I show you the sea surface temperature anomalies here in a second. This is for the 16th of July, and this is from yesterday. And look at these sea surface temperatures. Your 80-degree isotherm, that's the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm there in yellow, already north of 40 degrees north in latitude. Wow, that is impressive for mid-July, and that goes all the way back here well into the central Atlantic, all the way back towards, say, the Cabo Verde Islands. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is this, the entire Atlantic basin here is pretty much favorable, except if you're north of the 26-degree isotherm, then it's not favorable technically thermodynamically. But when you get these tropical waves that come off of Africa, they typically track this way, and usually they kind of go out like this for August, September, and even October. Some of them may turn out to sea, but even look at this. Water temperatures over Bermuda are running about 27, 28 degrees Celsius, which is the mid-80s, or actually the low to mid-80s for this time of the year. But wow, the Gulf of Mexico, I'm telling you guys, folks, you need to be concerned about that, because 30, 31, 32 Celsius is literally almost off the charts, or is off the charts on this particular map. And look at the sea surface temperature anomalies here from cyclonic.com or wx.com. Water temperatures here in the main development region still 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius above the long-term average. They are still recordly warm for this time of the year. Look at the water temperatures off Louisiana, off the Florida coast, running 2.5 degrees Celsius above average. And I'll tell you, right after Beryl went through, water temperature's been chugged away a little bit, but they are already making a comeback in a hurry there. And so by the time we go into August and early September, the Gulf will pretty much be untapped for very intense, perhaps violent hurricanes should the background state become favorable. And the looks to this AMO, this basically the Iberian current, really setting us up, folks, for a hyperactive season, especially the last half of August into September, October, and even early to mid-November. We could be dealing with intense hurricanes well into mid-November, perhaps, because of how record warm the Atlantic is. And it's kind of one of those things that we're glad we have a lot of Saharan dust coming off of Africa, because this is putting a lid of otherwise very favorable conditions. We have the shear out there to contend with, mainly a lot of dust and dry air. That's what this satellite imagery shows us, or not really a satellite imagery, but a NASA dust extinction aerosol optical thickness model that looks at the forecast of Saharan dust into the future. And the white colors here indicate a lot of dust. I mean, probably where you can't see the sun very well at all. It actually brings down temperatures in that area quite nicely. Water temperatures can drop a little bit under that influence, but watch what happens. So you all are like, wow, it's a good thing that we have a lot of Saharan dust out there, but we cannot always hope for the best, all right? Because hope in itself is not enough to save yourself from, oh, we're not going to get prepared, because we know the pattern is going to change. We're seeing signs of that by late July into early August, but really by mid-August, I think we're going to have a lot to. We could have kind of a demolition derby race of named storms. I'm not saying demolition derby like we're going to have destruction or so, but I mean we're going to really get the names going on the list of the Atlantic names that the National Hurricane Center gives out. And so when we go forward here in the next 3 days, we can see, yes, there is Saharan dust, pretty widespread. But watch this. Let's go forward all the way into early next week. Watch this Saharan dust. The concentrations really wane away. Look at, I mean, from that, lots of Saharan dust to now really backing off. We're starting to see more of these blue colors, these purple colors, which really, it's pretty much a third of what it is now, right? Because right now we're up to like 75 to about 1 unit on the Saharan dust in nanometers, which are basically how much dust concentration there is in the atmosphere. So the lesser dust here to begin with means, well, we are not going to see a whole lot of, not as much dry air moving off of Africa, and the background state becomes more conducive because we're not seeing as much strong ridging over Africa, which would otherwise blow a lot of that dust off, right? So we're going to start to lose that dust, and we're going to begin the transition into a very busy period, possibly or more than likely by early August. Now I think it's a really good idea that we do compare our last 3 very busy Atlantic hurricane seasons. We all recognize Maria, Irma in 2017. We won't forget about that season. That was a very destructive season by all means. Jose we had, right? You name it, a very classic comical MDR outbreak of systems. So looking at the upper ocean heat content for that year versus what we have now, you will be stunned because this is warm enough, right? That's why we had Maria and Irma so insanely intense, because of the upper ocean heat content was really high. This is basically looking at how much heat is being stored below the surface of the water, right? The skin of the ocean. Looking down, we still have our 80-degree isotherm deeper down, and the deeper that is, the more upper ocean heat content accumulation you get, and that's these red colors. So looking at that season, if this gave us a very busy season, not a hyperactive one, right? Because we didn't get like 25 named storms that season, but we had a few category or 2 or 3 category 5 hurricanes, right? So that's what the upper ocean heat content looked like back then. And we all will recognize this season, 2020, that gave us 31 depressions. And I think 30 named storms with 1 depression. That makes 31, right? If my memory serves correctly. Either way, hyperactive. We went into the Greek alphabet. You remember that, right? We had Delta, we had Eta, we had Iota, something like Iota. Yeah. You get the idea of how hyperactive that season was. And look at what the upper ocean heat content looked like back then. Okay, even the Gulf, not as high as it is what you're about to see, right? So now when we take a look at the year 2024, let's go and fast forward 4 years into the future here, well, to present day. And what you're about to see is alarming. And I do not like to use the word hype. I don't like to hype things up, scare you all to just get views. That's not what this is about. But you all, let me get to the right frame. There we go. I don't like to hype things up. I don't like to cause panic or anything. I'm here to making sure you all are prepared for this. But you need to absolutely be afraid of these numbers of the upper ocean heat content. We are seeing reds and dark oranges even east of the Windward Islands. Look at how ridiculous and widespread this is. All the way into the eastern portion of the Gulf of Mexico, and look at even a little bit of a lobe here of orange. Are you kidding me? These waters up here are in the 31 Celsius territory, like in the northeastern Gulf and we have exceptionally high upper ocean heat content in that area, and very high over the Cayman Islands, over Jamaica. We talked about this yesterday, but putting into a comparison of 2017, 2020, and gosh, this year is by all means even the highest I have ever seen the upper ocean heat content. And I'm not doing this to scare you all. This is real facts. This is from the University of Miami, and this needs to be taken seriously because, boy, if the background state, that is very little wind shear, no dry air to speak of, and the upper ocean heat content like it is now is favorable, we could be in some big trouble with rapidly, explosively intensifying hurricanes. We saw it with Lee, we saw it with Beryl. Those were quickly, rapidly intensifying hurricanes in a very favorable oceanic environment with high upper ocean heat content. We even saw it with Dorian. We saw it with Irma. We saw it with Maria. Very intense, violent hurricanes that make history. And Beryl, by no exception, is made history already because of how high the upper ocean heat content is. And that didn't even do much. It didn't even chug away at that number there or those colors at all. And I have fear, I am scared that this hurricane season could be one for the record books that we have not seen at least since 2020, if not worse. Could be the worst ever recorded. And I'll say this time and time again, I'm not trying to scare you all and cause panic. Please don't think that. I'm not here to do that, but I'm just stating the facts that I see with the upper ocean heat content. I have a machine learning of all of this dating back to 2010 when I began to track the tropics, and I know what I'm looking for. And what I'm looking for this year is big trouble happening in the Gulf, the Caribbean, and the main development region. So another product that I want to show you all is the potential intensity. All right, so this is, again, factoring in sea surface temperatures, upper level dynamics, if the wind pattern becomes favorable. All right, so in simple words, what I'm looking for is imagining this. Picture this in your head. The wind shear is generally less than 5 or so knots. The moisture quality in the deep layer for tropical cyclones is greater than 70% or even 75%, right? Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you know what happens, right? And sea surface temperatures are extremely warm with record-breaking upper ocean heat content, right? This is the potential intensity with minimum central pressure. How strong can a hurricane possibly get if everything lines up as favorably as possible? Okay, I want to make that clear with you all. I don't want to lose you all here. I don't want to confuse you. This is important because this gives us an idea of how favorable are these water temperatures? How favorable could the background state become to allowing such intense hurricanes? And so what we're seeing here is in the Gulf, you can just kind of sign off and you can just say 880 millibars of minimum central pressure. And that is no surprise because we're seeing 31, 32 Celsius waters, upper 80s, low 90 water temperatures there off the coast of Florida and Louisiana. We know it's shelf waters. It's likely to cool down very quickly, even with the complex of thunderstorms, but still warm and hot is a big deal. And then, of course, in the Caribbean, we saw it with Lee. Because Lee formed with environmental pressure of really high numbers, 1,016, 17 millibars, Lee was relatively intense for its air pressure, its minimum central pressure being about 935-ish millibars. But this gives you an idea of how low the pressure can be here in the Caribbean, and it could get down to as low as 910 millibars, which is Category 5 hurricane in a general sense. So now when we scroll down here, here's the potential maximum wind intensity here. And you could just say, we saw it with, Beryl, had a pressure of 936. If I said Lee just prior of that, sorry, get my names mixed up. But you get the idea here. We saw with Beryl, 175 mile an hour Category 5 hurricane. That was devastating. That's going to go down in the record books. Will more than likely get retired because it caused a lot of devastation over the Yucatan, over Texas as well as some of the Windward Islands down here. And look at this, it matches up perfectly. We saw Lee weaken to a Category 4 south of, remember, Jamaica, because of the water temperatures and everything coming together for that. And that really makes this valuable and important. And look at how warm. Water temperatures are so warm in the Gulf, you could support a 165 knot hurricane. That is 180, 190 mile an hour hurricane. That is a straight up violent Category 5 hurricane if everything comes together. So you all need to check this out. There will be a link in the description below this video leading to that, because this is scary. This is not good at all. A lot of this heat being stored in the ocean could be used for intense violent hurricanes by the time we go into August, September, October, and even into November. Boy, I am sorry if I'm rambling about that, but it's important we look at these products that I show you all, because I got a comment in yesterday's video saying that I am very detailed, I am very thorough, and that's what I like to hear from you and for all. So here's a look at the GFS model. This is the American model, and I showed this in yesterday's video, a 3-plot system. So the black lines are height thicknesses at 5,000 feet above the surface. So this is the lower half of the atmosphere. Think of the atmosphere as slices like Earth's crust, but we're looking at the atmosphere. So this is the low level. And then the color shading is vorticity, how much spin there is in the atmosphere. The more spin, the tighter it is, the more darker colors you get. So you get reds, and dark reds indicate very tight spin. I showed you that in previous videos when we looked at Beryl, what it looked like. It's a very compact system. In fact, if we just go to the Western Pacific, this is what we're looking for. See these dark spots here? That's what we're looking for in the Atlantic, because that indicates a lot of vorticity spin. Okay, so going forward here in time, big ridge of high pressure, the Bermuda High, the Azores High, however you want to call it, pretty strong. And then you get your wind barbs showing us the wind speed and direction. So we get winds that are doing this around the high pressure system. And going forward, we can see really nothing to speak of in the Atlantic, other than, yes, we get these big tropical waves, but each time these tropical waves develop, we get some drier air spilling off of Africa and some dusty air as well, except it's not going to be as dusty as what we're seeing it right now. You could even see plenty full of moisture on the northern flank of this too, so this could wrap up and bundle up. We'll see what future model runs show this when it gets closer in time, but right now, for the time being, we are not seeing anything in the way of any tropical development at all, even through early August. And Mark said it does this right now because there's not a lot going on, and I'm even going to do it now. You're going to see a model like this at, oh, there's no activity, David. What are you talking about? You said there's going to be hyperactive activity in early or most of August. We got to understand this is 384 hours out, and predicting a tropical storm on the 2nd or the 1st of August is like predicting where a needle in a haystack will be. Try searching for a needle in the haystack and having that cubic block being about a square mile. You're not going to find that needle very easily or predict on when you're going to find it, right? So it's hard for the models to resolve mathematical equations that give us these images of intense hurricanes that far out. So I'm just letting you all know, in simple terms, nothing to be concerned about, at least for the next 7 to 10 days. That's a guarantee. I'm not seeing anything at all, which is good, but we all know that's going to change once we get into August. All right, so now another product is the European model. Same thing, vorticity plot, and we can see there is really nothing other than, yes, we get these tropical waves. There's a broad one, not a lot of spin on it, too broad to do anything, but we're also seeing tropical waves coming off of Africa that look a little more intense. But I'm telling you folks, this is as quiet as it's going to get, because once we get into August, you better be ready, you better be prepared, or else it's going to end very bad for you depending on where you live. And I don't want to say that to force you guys to get prepared. I don't want to give you all the scare, the fear, the mongering, but it's a good idea that you get prepared because nature's being nice to you. You're getting an extra opportunity here to make sure your gas generator's ready, make sure you have enough water, emergency aid kit, an evacuation plan just in case if you do have to evacuate during the peak of the hurricane season. Once it gets going in August, September, and October and November, you could have a plan in place. And after all, I'm here to make sure you all are prepared. Don't be scared. Be prepared. And we can be prepared by looking at the European Ensemble Prediction System here. Is to look at our velocity plot. And I'm going to go into brief detail. I know this is going to be a really long video, but I haven't done one of these very super long videos in a while. So it's nice for a change to add in more thorough detail into this. So what we have down here is our MJO regions, our Mercator projection. So Earth is round, not flat. Some people say it's flat. I don't believe it's flat, it's round. But we can stretch these images out to better look at the entire tropics without just kind of looking at a 3D globe, right? So the Atlantic, in simple terms, I did this yesterday. I boxed this area in right here. This is the area that we really, actually, it's more like over here. Okay, so when you look at the Gulf of Mexico, which is over here, and then the Caribbean, and then the Atlantic, the deep tropics there, this is what we look for, okay, for any areas of sinking motion or rising motion. So the green colors here are rising motion, and then the date timestamps are right here. So you have July 17th, July 19th, the 21st, the 23rd, and this goes now all the way out to the very first day of August. So the further down you go, you increase your time, okay? So we can see by July the 27th here on this map, okay, so July the 27th, we can see that there's going to be a lot of sinking motion. You kind of put that all into context here on that day. There's going to be a lot of sinking happening over this Western Pacific and even for portions of the Indian Ocean basin. But once we go into, say, the latter part of July into early August, look at where all the rising motion focuses. Over Africa. What's over Africa? Lots of tropical wave activity. We get these complexes of thunderstorms, convergence along the intertropical convergence zone. Things become really favorable when you have a lot of rising motion over Africa and over the Indian Ocean basin in phases roughly 1 and 2, so to speak, on the MJO phase diagram, which I'll show you here. So what this is telling me is that the Atlantic will be opening up for business once we go into late July. We see that happening. Lots of rising motion over Africa. We have possibly a convective coupled Kelvin wave that focuses its way here. It's going to go down the timeline to the right here. So this is an eastward propagation of a convective coupled Kelvin wave, and it should get into the Atlantic basin right around the 1st through the 7th of August. So we expect a lot of activity to really get going here in the tropics by early August, maybe the last day of July, the 31st, that is. I think we're going to have a lot to track for, especially in August. So to better explain this, Eric Webb put together a really nice Twitter post here. There will be a link in the description below this video, so you all can click on this after the video is finished here. But you can see here, this is outdated, but it's still it's pretty much current because it gives us an idea what the season will look like and when we see activity pick up in the Atlantic. So right now, we're pretty much in, let's go over here. So we're pretty much in phase 6 right now with the MJO, and we will show you that here in a second. A fairly unfavorable environment over the Atlantic. A lot of sinking motion. These blue anomalies here indicate below average tropical activity. That's now. This is not for the season, folks. But as we play this through, you'll see down here on that Mercator projection. So I know it's hard to see. Here is Africa here. Here is the Eastern Pacific. Here is the Western Pacific. right down here, if you all can see that very nicely. And so it's surprisingly after the upward motion in the troposphere moves across Africa is when things really lighten up. And you'll see that here once this plays through. So you can see this is where we are going to be headed right about in here. This is where a lot of the upward motion is going to be. And look at what it means. Lots of tropical activity in the Caribbean, in the Gulf of Mexico, and even over, say, the main development region. So this really lines up very nicely. And even if we go into the next frame here on the post, we can see, even so, your upward motion, the velocity potential is not over Africa, and it's over, say, India and the Western Pacific. There's usually a delay. Your low-level convergence is maximized actually over Western Africa and over the Atlantic, which explains why we have hyperactive tropical activity during phase 3 and 4 especially. So what this means is we're gonna get our butts moving here on the tropics, and I think it's gonna get really active once we go into August. And that's no surprise. When we take a look at the phase diagram, we can see where the MJO is right now. So almost in that favorable phase right now. It's in the unit of circle. There's other factors that play a role in this. There's a convective coupled Kelvin wave. There's other wave patterns that oscillate and affect this as well. This does not necessarily mean that, oh, just because we have it in phase 4 means we're going to have a lot of activity. There's other things. MJO is one of them that helps get the atmosphere. It's an impetus to get activity going, to kind of get that spark to ignite the fuel, in other words. So we can see that the MJO is going to be slowly moving into phase 1, and then I am assuming it's going to probably do something like this again. And when it gets into this area of the phase diagram, that's when the Atlantic really lightens up with activity. Now, before I do end the video, I do want to make sure you all understand with how serious this Atlantic hurricane season could actually be. Again, I'm not here to cause any fear, any hype, or any panic. I'm not here to cause that. Please understand that. If you still think I'm causing fear or hype, go watch someone else. I really don't care, because I am doing my job at the end of the day to making sure you all are prepared. And when all agencies are predicting a hyperactive season, my forecast and prediction is no stranger danger at all. It's no different, in other words. And that's why I want you all to be prepared, because of what I showed you in today's video really does ask for a hyperactive season, and a very dangerous one, perhaps a scary one, especially over the Caribbean. We saw Beryl, we saw Alberto, and yet we had Chris as well. Just 3 named storms already, and it's only mid-July. And wait until we get into August, September, October, and it's one of those things we could have a very busy hyperactive period through even mid to late October, and it becomes very active possibly through mid-November. It's one of those seasons that we could have a lot of activity for a while. But otherwise, if you did enjoy today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Hit the like button and share this video with your family and friends on social media. As always, have a great rest of your Wednesday on this 17th day of July. I will be back with you more soon on the tropics.